What's going on? Welcome to episode 20 of the Hike.files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman, and this week I'm going to talk to you about the Gerard Hiking Trail. This is a 36-mile backpacking loop located in western Pennsylvania. I've had the pleasure of doing this trail back in 2020 during the pandemic. A group of us went out and did the entire 36 miles. It was a lot of fun, even though I was in excruciating pain by the end because this is the trip that my shoes fell apart and my feet were bleeding by the end. So that wasn't fun. But that did not change my opinion of the trail. I loved it and I would absolutely love to go back. So I'm going to talk about some of the unique things about this trail because it is fairly unique for the state of Pennsylvania. So we'll get right into it. Unique thing number one is that this is the only backpacking trail, not hiking trail, but backpacking trail that I know of in the state that is wholly encompassed within a state park. And that state park is Oil Creek State Park. There's several other backpacking trails that go through state parks, such as the Laurel Highlands Trail goes through Laurel Ridge State Park, I think it's called. And there might be one more it goes through. You've got the Quehanna Trail, which starts and ends in Parker Dam State Park, but then it goes outside of the park into the Moshannon and Elk State Forests. You've got the Allegheny Front Trail, which is mostly in the Moshannon State Forest, and then goes through the Black Moshannon State Park. You've got the Susquehannock Trail, which goes through, I'm not going to try and name them all, several, like maybe 5 or 6 state parks, and then goes right past 3 or 4 more. That's a big trail. It's 80 or 90 miles. That's a big loop. Like I said, this is the only one that is completely enclosed within the state park, which makes it unique. And the reason why that's unique is because in Pennsylvania, primitive camping, backpacking in state parks is usually not allowed. There's only one other park that's allowed in, that is that Laurel Ridge State Park that the Laurel Highlands Trail goes through. Now, the catch with this is that you need to have a permit to camp at these spots. And in the case of the Gerard Hiking Trail, because I haven't done the Laurel Highlands yet, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. As far as the Gerard Hiking Trail, there's 2 areas on this entire 36-mile loop that you can camp. You can't just set up camp anywhere. You got to stay at either the Cow Run shelter area or the Wolfkill Run shelter area. And I'll talk more about those as we get into the information about the trail. Now, the other unique part of this is that Oil Creek State Park. It is the site of the first ever commercial oil well, and there is so much history in the area, and a lot of it it's being preserved, including several farms that were there back at the time of the oil discovery. There's replica oil derricks. There's the remnants of oil pipes and oil wells and pump stations. There's a railroad that goes through there that is still active. There's a ghost town. There's a cemetery that you go by. There's all kinds of interesting stuff. Machinery that's been left over, old shacks, all kinds of stuff. So it seems every time you turn around, there's something to look at. And it's really cool. It's unique because there's not a lot of backpacking trails in the state where that happens. You may come across something here or there, but this trail is pretty much designed to take you right by all this stuff. So it's really interesting. There are a few vistas, so to speak, but they're not big sweeping vistas because this trail, when you look at it, it is a loop, but it's like a rubber band stretched out. It's much longer than it is wide, much, much, much longer. It's only maybe a couple 100 feet wide at the very ends. It's just enough to get across Oil Creek and then you just turn and go right back the other direction. So as you're going, you're on the south end of it going east to west or west to east, depending which way you're going. We did it counterclockwise. So we started on the east side and then worked our way west and then crossed to the north side and then worked our way back east. So as you're going along the river and you look across at the other side and it's maybe only a quarter mile to half mile away, you're looking at the other side of the trail. You can see the trail from the trail. It's really, really, really cool. And it's like that the entire way. So yeah, a few really unique things about the trail. And I do have some actual information here about the history of the trail and some other cool facts about it. And this is from the Friends of Oil Creek State Park. And I'm not sure where you are listening to this from, but in Pennsylvania, a lot of the state parks have a Friends of group, which are usually volunteers, and they do maintenance. They help with maintenance and events and classes and things like that. The Friends of State Park, the Friends of Oil Creek are the group that do all the administrative work and a lot of the maintenance on the Gerard hiking trail. So the trail itself was named after Ray Gerard, who was a park volunteer. He developed the trail and he maintained it for 16 years. Unfortunately, he passed away back in 1997, but he left this trail behind for everybody to use and enjoy. And his design of it is fantastic. Like I said, it takes you by all this history and it's really, really cool. He also organized a volunteer group called the Over the Hill Gang. And this group are the ones who do a lot of the maintenance on the trail. They do a great job. So if you're ever out there and you see these fine folks who do the maintenance, make sure you thank them because they do a great, great job. Like I mentioned, a lot of historic stuff that you pass. You can go down to the main day use of the state park where the state park office is. There's a lot of information about the history of oil in the area. I think they got a small museum there. And then that's at a very narrow point of the trail. And you can actually walk from there. There's a little picnic area. We stopped there for lunch on the first day. And then you can just walk across the bridge and there's Petroleum Center, which is the old ghost town, which I highly recommend you check out, even if you stop there first before you do the hike and then go to the trailhead, or if you stop there on your way past it, because you're going to pass it twice. Definitely recommend you do it. There's no buildings there anymore aside from the very cool train station that's there. But they've got like a boardwalk system set up where the old main street used to be of Petroleum Center. And where all the buildings used to be, they've got a plaque with a picture of the old building and information about what it was. It's really, really cool. Some of the farms that you pass through, they got a list here: Miller Farm, Schaefer Farm, Boughton, and then Pioneer and Petroleum Center. You go through all these places. There's obviously waterfalls. There's some vistas. It's pretty cool. Now, this trail is blazed in yellow, which is another kind of unique thing. Backpacking trails usually are orange in Pennsylvania, but this one is yellow. It's one of the few exceptions. And there's a series of other trails out there because this is a state park, so there's other day trails. You can also cut this down into smaller bits and pieces because there are several spots where you can cross Oil Creek and go from one side of the valley to the other and make the loop shorter if you would like. So there's a lot of options as far as how you do this trail and what you can see and what you can do. The trail itself is very well maintained. I'm trying to think, and I don't believe that there was any water crossings that didn't have a bridge, unless they're like really small, like you could just step over them. But I don't remember any point where you had to cross rocks. Everything had bridges, and some of the bridges were massive for what you were going across. There are a couple climbs, but it's a relatively easy hike. The spots that were the toughest, the first climb we did go on the south end was pretty easy, if I remember correctly. There were a couple of ups and downs. I think really the first tough spot that we came to was on the second day, the descent on the very east side. So we started on the west side and went east along the southern section first. We went counterclockwise. But when you get up to the turn over by the Drake Well Museum, then you've got your first big descent. And that was probably the rockiest spot. Everything else was pretty smooth. A few rocks, but not bad. That was the rockiest spot. And I do remember when we got down, we stuck our feet in a creek for a while and just relaxed. It wasn't horrible, but yeah, we were ready to take a little bit of a break. The next, going up the ridge on the second day on the north side was pretty easy out of the Drake Well area. The worst climb that I remember, there was one small one where you meander your way up and then immediately drop back down and you go up like a couple hundred feet and immediately drop it down. They got gain all that back. I don't know why they did that. And it was just one of those things where you're like, oh, who put this here? But there's a hill, and if you're going counterclockwise, it would be towards the end of your trip. You leave Petroleum Center, and then you go up this hill, and I think I'm still climbing it 2 years later. It just went on forever, and it was muddy, and it was raining, and my feet hurt. And I just remember every step you took, you slid back like half a step. It was that muddy. And you look up, you're like, I got to be towards the top. And I made the mistake of looking at my map and realized I was less than halfway. And I almost cried. It was brutal. But I think that had more to do with my shoes than the actual trail. So there's a couple spots like that. But all in all, there was nothing really technical. There was no rock scrambles. There were no ladders nailed into rocks or anything like that. It was just a couple of climbs. But if you take your time, it's no big deal. A very enjoyable trail as far as that goes. Vistas, there's a few. It was spring and everything was green or getting green. So there were views, vistas. You don't look at, they're not big, large, sweeping vistas. But I think more the vistas on this trail are the points of interest, all the history. Plenty of water options, little tributaries that go down at Oil Creek. It is not recommended, and I would never recommend that you get your water from something like Oil Creek, especially right at this point, because you are right outside of Titusville, Pennsylvania, and it's coming through the city, so you never know what's going to get into the water. They do not recommend you grab your water from there, even if you're filtering it and treating it. They don't recommend it. I remember it was pandemic, so I think there was a vending machine at the office on the east end, but I don't remember, to be honest. We just were grabbing water as we could. There's also a rail trail that follows Oil Creek it parallels the Gerard hiking trail on the north side of the river. And I think it goes all the way down it might go all the way down to Petroleum Center. I don't know if it goes all the way the length of the park. I'm looking at the map now, and it doesn't look like it goes all the way. Yeah, no, it doesn't look like it goes all the way. But that's fine. It's 12 miles of river. So that gives you 24, just the length of the river itself gives you 24 miles of the trail. And then it does meander out through some, I'm not sure what they call them out there, some drafts or washes or ravines, whatever you want to call them. And that gives you the rest of your mileage. And like I said, it's about 36 miles. So the last thing I want to talk about is the camping situation. So like I said earlier, you do need to reserve a spot, but you're getting really nice camping accommodations. It's like glamping for backpacking. There are 2 areas you can camp. One on the south end, one on the north end. The Cow Run shelter area on the south and the Wolf Kill Run area on the north. They each have, I think, 6 or 8 shelters and then large tent camping areas. And then there were several spots where you could hang hammocks as well. But what you get for what you pay is incredible. The cost, and looking at the website now, right now as I'm reading this, the prices have not changed. There we go. There's my tab. The prices have not changed. It is $4 per person. That gets you either a tent spot or shelter. That's if you're a resident of the state. If you're not a resident, it's $5 for a site or a shelter. Now, I do not remember if they actually assign you a shelter or if you just first come, first serve a shelter. I do not remember. We got a tent site. There was no one else on the trail while we were out there. So we did use one of the picnic tables by the shelter. We hung out by the shelters, but we didn't use the shelters. It was really cool though. So you got the shelter. The shelters have fireplaces, full, not fire rings, fireplaces. So they're Adirondack style shelters, and right in the middle of the opening, right at the edge of the eave, is a fireplace, and the chimney goes up past the eave, up over the roof of the shelter, And in the winter, since there are cross-country skiing trails and snowshoeing trails in that area, you can rent these year-round. They got them set up so you can hang a tarp over those openings. So if you need to enclose a little bit more to keep the heat in, you can do that. Really, really cool. The fireplaces are big enough to cook in and use for warmth. Awesome. Some of the nicest shelters I've ever seen. They also give you bathrooms. So they're like pit toilet bathrooms. They give you bear boxes, which are way outside of camp. So you don't have to worry about anything coming into camp and disturbing your food. And then there's also water, but keep in mind that the water is brought in a barrel. And then they put it on a platform and it's gravity fed. So if there's a lot of people using the trail, water may be scarce. So they do recommend that you use it sparingly. And both of the shelter areas are near water sources. So, I mean, you're going to want to have a filter with you anyway when you're backpacking and water collection. So it is recommended that you take as much water as you can with you and really use the water that they offer sparingly. And that's all included in the $4 or $5, depending on if you're a resident or not. It's really cool. It's a really cool setup. Now, like I said, there are only those 2 sections that you can camp in. And they do keep track of how many people are on the trail. So that helps keep it maintained. So if you can go out there and day hike all you want, but you can only camp if there's room. So it's a good way of keeping the trail usage in check and the camp usage in check. It gives them dedicated spots that they have to watch for erosion or damage from camping instead of having to go around the trail and look at multiple campsites. So it's a little bit different, but it really is backpack glamping. It really is. I'll put links to all the stuff that I'm looking at here to give you this information. This is the Friends of Oil Creek State Park webpage, which is friendsocsp.org is the website. Link will be in the show notes below. There's maps here. There's photos. There's a backpackers survey that you can take. They've got YouTube videos. They've got all kinds of stuff. So it's all definitely worth checking out. Also, make sure that you check out the state park itself when you're there, because there's a lot of stuff to go see. And I've been there twice. The first time I went there was 2015. I was doing a 3-day road trip to Western PA. I was really on a kick of trying to get as many state parks done, like 2 or 3 years. I just was going to as many state parks as I could. So I went out to Western PA, Northwestern PA, and I think I got 5 parks on that trip. And one of the last ones was Oil Creek. I woke up in the morning. I was camping at Pymatuning State Park, and I woke up and it was pouring rain. I knew it was going to be raining. I didn't realize it'd be raining that bad. My tent was leaking. And this is back before I was doing hammocks. And I woke up in a puddle in my tent. So I just got up at, I think, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was early. And I just pulled the poles out, like threw the air mat, just deflated it, threw it in the back seat. And then I just pulled the poles out, folded the tent, and threw it in the back of the Jeep. I didn't even pack it down. And I got in the car. I drove over to Titusville, PA, because I knew there was the Oil Creek State Park there, and I wanted to check it out. But I got there so early. It was still dark. It was like maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, and I had no signal. It was all like back roads with paper maps because I couldn't pull a GPS. There was no way to do it with what I had. So I wound up finding my way over there, went to the local Sheets, got something to eat, and then took a nap in the car. And by the time I got down to the state park, it was still dark. It was just, the sun was just coming up. And the first place I stopped was right across the river from the Drake Oil Museum. And it's one of the Gerard Trail trailheads. It's on the east side. And I got out of the car and I was just looking at the sign. And I was like, oh, that looks like a cool trail. And I took a picture of the sign, looked into it a little bit, and it never dawned on me at that point that it was a backpacking trail because it was in a state park. I just never thought it was a backpacking trail until a few years later, and I started talking with Adam Z, like I met Adam, and he started talking about it, and he's mentioning this trail. And I'm like, man, that sounds really familiar. The Gerard Trail. And then I went through my pictures and I found it. I was like, oh, okay. I want to go back there. And I'm so glad we did. It's a lot of fun. It's a great trail. I want to go back and do it again and just make sure that my shoes are in good shape so they don't fall apart again. And don't think that was the trail's fault. That was just manufacturing defects in those shoes. I don't even know how that happened. But yeah, I'd like to be able to do it and enjoy the entire thing instead of trying to numb the pain in my feet mentally as we're hiking. And it poured the last day, so that didn't help. But it caused a lot of hiking mistakes for me. And that dealing with the shoes and my feet and how much it hurt, that caused a lot of hiking mistakes for me. I left my trekking poles behind at one point. I had to turn around and go back, and I was moving really slow anyway. So I was way behind the group and just miserable, but enjoying it. But I would like to be able to do it without thinking about that. It would be very nice. So if you are looking at doing the Gerard hiking trail, check out the links I put in the show notes that will give you everything you need to know about the camping situation. There, like I said, there's maps and there's all kinds of information there. So definitely check that out. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and let me know if there's any other trails that you'd like me to cover on the podcast. I go through my video list every so often and just look at things that might pop out and people might be interested in. And then I also use, ironically enough, YouTube has a pretty good research tab that shows what people are interested in, the genre that you put out videos. So I was looking at that, and one of the things it said that people were searching for was the Gerard Trail. So I figured, I know that, do a podcast on it. So here we are. But again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll get this edited and get it up for you. That's going to do it for me for this one. See you in the next.